So we'll start the session. So a warm welcome to. Can you all hear?
Yes.
Yes. So a warm welcome to the 64th Rajagiri Roundtable Conference, which is on the subject of NGOs and their role in inclusive learning during this COVID pandemic. Um, to begin with, I will just introduce myself. My name is Srikumar Raghavan. I am the editor of the Pallikudam magazine, which is brought out by the Rajagiri. This is the flagship of the Rajagiri Media, and this organization was started 8 years ago in Cochin, and now we are engaged in so many activities. This roundtable itself is one of the important activities that we conduct every month, and this is the 64th episode. So we have covered more than 5 years now. So basically, we discuss a lot of issues related to education, right from the preschool learning to uh, university and beyond. And also, we discuss a lot of issues related to parenting, social issues. The idea of the Rajagiri Roundtable is that we not only discuss problems and also some of the issues that face the education sector. We also try to synergize the views made by different people, different participants, the panelists, and then we try to come to a set of policy recommendations. So recently, we had initiated a lot of new activities. That was the two national awards were initiated by us. One was on education, on innovation, National Award, Pallikudam National Award for Innovation, which was basically meant to honor the schools which had done some outstanding work during the COVID pandemic to ensure that their children did not suffer because of lack of any digital device or any access to learning. So across the country, around 55 schools had participated, and one rural school based in Nagaland had won the Golden Award. There the emphasis was not on the use of technology, but a blending of limited technology and more of offline activities, which was more suited for their needs, rather than following a practice which is more acceptable in another place or in a better setting. They followed a practice which can be easily implemented in rural settings. So that was the merit the judging committee found in that. And then this was followed up by another national award for Edu startups, because so many Edu startups are working in the country and they have come up with some innovative solutions. So we wanted to honor them. So that was also done in the month of September. So going ahead, we thought the non-governmental organizations, there are so many in the country, and they have been involved in so many activities. We ourselves got in touch with them through in the last couple of months since the lockdown. And one of them was the Katha India, where we had an interaction with their founder, Geeta Dharmajan. And we also had a lot of interaction with other NGOs. So we thought, why don't we have a discussion with the NGOs? What are the problems they face in this lockdown period in implementing this kind of inclusive learning? We are happy to have Society as the what do you call knowledge partner for this event, and Prashant Abhi was very much interested in associating with us when we discussed this issue. And he has brought in a large number of participants for this event. And we are outset, I'm very thankful to Prashant Abhi and team for bringing this for so many participants for this forum. So basically, we'll start off with, we want all people in this group to actively contribute. This is not a seminar kind of model. So to begin with, I think we'll start off with what exactly the NGOs did during this COVID pandemic. Actually, this was a big challenge for all schools, whether it is the private sector, or whether it is in the government sector or even in the informal sector. So many troubles they had to go through because of this lockdown, and children didn't have digital access. So I myself know I am teaching in one or two places where their attendance is so low because they don't have the basic internet connectivity. So this issue has been there across the country, tribal areas, but some innovative solutions have always been found. So to begin with, I think we can start off with, of course, society will give a opportunity for them to also interact, and they are being our knowledge partner. But before that, I think we'll start off the discussion by just looking at how the NGOs found this situation, that suddenly we were put into this pandemic, and how we had to go through this initial phase, and how they implemented some of the initiatives that they were able to do. So who would be the first person to comment on this from the...
We can go first. Mithali, do you want to
start? I'll go. Yeah.
So just briefly introduce your organization also,
yes.
Will be great.
Okay, so I'll quickly then do that. I am Manjusmita, and my colleague Miss Mithali Bose, she's also here. We're both from Ektara in Calcutta. We work in the largest slum community of the city, and our focus is on delivering high quality English medium education to the girls living in these slums. So pre-pandemic, we had our own education facility where we ran programs right from early childhood literacy, right from pre-primary to middle school, and we also facilitated sending high school students to other schools in the city. So organizing the financial aid, taking care of remedial classes, all of those things were looked into by us. Our objective is to basically give access to high quality education to those who cannot afford it, and also to build capacities of their families to eventually take on some onus, and so that it's a sustainable model, and it's not just us kind of doling out or holding hands with them and taking them ahead. So our capacity building of families is also a very, very important part of the work that we do. Now, we work with first generation learners. Most of them are migrant minority workers who've come in from neighboring states, because where we work used to be the leather hub of the city. So naturally, I mean, we could not even imagine ever doing remote classes with these children. It's something that would have never worked, but the pandemic forced us to look at new options, new ways, and I think Mithali can tell us more about that. Mithali, over to you.
Okay, so this COVID-19, of course, had taken all of us by surprise, and we were literally unprepared on how to take teaching, learning methodology forward, because we just ended it was a term end, and we had to take on this COVID-19 situation where we needed to engage the children in all these months that went by. And as Manjushmita said, that all the children who we deal with are first generation learners, and we work with urban slum children, so their home environment was actually not conducive to learning, and the children did not have access to gadgets or devices of their own, so they were depending more on their parents or fathers who would go out to work. So those were some of the challenges. But I would begin with, on a positive side, is that the children responded to activity-based learning, which we termed it as tele-learning, where we gave out projects over the phone using WhatsApp or just a common telephone through voice messages or SMSs. And these activities were over 5 days. And each day the teacher would call up the students at a specific time and explain the project each day for the child to complete at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, the children who had WhatsApp would submit their project to the teachers. And in case they had any problems during the day in implementation of, doing the project, they would call up the teachers, and the teachers were on call when the projects were sent out to the children. Now, the activity-based tele-learning, they were child-friendly, and these involved the parents and older siblings to also help the children. So this is what we had started. But as we went along, the children did respond. They found it very interesting. But as the challenges where all of us are now talking about, what is the future of how do we take it forward? Because the greatest challenge is internet connection, lack of devices, and, and it became difficult for the children who took some time to understand those projects or the activities that were given out to them. So these were some of the challenges that we had to face, and it was very stressful for the teachers as well. But we did manage to at least engage all our children into these activity-based learning. So this is what we did during the pandemic, and gradually some of the children who went to mainstream schools or formal schools, they had their online classes, and it was very difficult for them without any devices to carry on with the online classes of the school. So gradually we opened our facility and allowed the children in a staggered way to come into our facility and access our computers for them to continue with their online classes. So this is what we did during the, and we are still going on with it.
Great. So what we felt was that basically activity-oriented learning
Yes.
was the methodology that most of the organizations had to adopt.
Yes. So
Yes.
I'll just make another quick note. And we basically partnered. So we are a grassroots level organization that doesn't specialize in designing curriculums or, designing modules. So we partnered with an organization called Education Above All and used their internet free resource bank, education resource bank, to take on different PBLs, different project-based learning methodologies, and adopted it to and kind of modified it to suit the needs of our children. We have over 1,000 children in different age groups. So we would take weekly projects from that bank, modify it. Our teachers were trained to do that. They would modify based on the capacities of the kids that they were dealing with, the groups that they were in charge of. They would adapt the modules, adapt the projects, and so it's all. I mean, PBLs are mostly multidisciplinary. So the whole idea was that there is a lot of activity involved, but it's also talking about important skills that the children need to acquire at their age appropriate level. So that is what we did, yes.
So the digital challenge is still there because we are now going to a post-COVID phase where we are going to talk about blended learning. Mm-hmm. And of course, activities are something which we can always pursue. But that doesn't come under the usual curriculum. That is maybe an add-on or. So how are we going to address the challenge of the blended learning that we are going to have in the post-COVID scenario? Because now we have understood that online learning is not very easy to implement. And not only the devices, lack of devices or connectivity, but basically we also have issues with respect to the pedagogy that we have to follow. So going ahead, we still don't know how long this pandemic will continue, or how long this lockdown situation will continue. But still, there is a post-lockdown phase also, where blended learning is going to happen. So how do you visualize, so many issues have to be solved, whether it is getting digital devices, but more importantly, we are going to have a blended learning curriculum. So how best we can address that?
So there are some, for blended learning, we need to have teachers training programs. The teachers need to be trained on how to go about blended learning, which they have never done ever before, right? So, and also the kind of curriculum that needs to be, part of blended learning, because there is a classroom teaching as well as digital learning. So what would be the curriculum So we need to go into that and understand how, because there is something like now, they have to learn code learning from class 6, and as NGOs, we don't have that kind. So we need hand holding, and I think the education startups that should come into the picture and help the NGOs, or with providing us with materials and resources on how should we go into blended learning. We do not have that kind of experience. This is something very new for us. And so it's starting from teachers training to what should be the curriculum, what should be the resources for, say, for example, differently able children, or as the NEP has mentioned, for gifted children. So what are these various levels where how can NGOs be helped in this area? That is my concern.
So are there any NGOs willing to share their experience, how they manage the situation? Shall I call Neeraj Naidu? Will you be able to? Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of how we manage the situation, it's almost similar to what just being said right now. Because we work in Sukma, which is a rural area, and using technology was just a distant dream here. It was impossible because, it's an old story now. I mean, everybody is just speaking about it for 6 months now. No networks, no devices, and no way of reaching to children through online media. I mean, it's a ever-going story now. So similar to what we said right now, we too have a lot of things that we have done with children. Mostly what we have done is we have created a lot of worksheets and books for children, which children can solve independently, read independently, or with the help of a parent or a village volunteer if possible. And we have distributed to many children out here in Sukma and also the neighboring district here. And because of that, a lot of people from villages, children who have passed 12th, or children or students who are studying in colleges, have come forward and taken this opportunity to teach very small children in their own villages. And they have then started using those worksheets, those books, which they have used to teach children. So one of the major ideas that we carried in our minds during the lockdown situation was that it's okay if children don't learn too much about what they used to learn in school. It is more important to practice what they have learned. That was one of the core ideas of creating worksheets. And then also, like Mitali said about the project, similar projects have been done here with children through the help of village volunteers. So one of the major learning from this is that this situation has pushed us to think that education doesn't only happen in schools. It has actually empowered communities. A lot of young people from villages have come forward to take care of the education of younger children in their communities. And even parents, like you say, like I think it is a very important role for all NGOs to break this mindset that, okay, you have to go to only schools can provide education. A lot of NGOs are working with parents. I know Vikramshila in Kolkata, they're working amazingly with parents, empowering them that parents can help a lot in teaching their children, in their child's learning. And young people from communities are getting something good to do. So these are a few things that we have been doing. And then I'll just take 2 minutes to speak about blended learning. There is a lot of buzz around blended learning right now, and it sure is an exceptional way of taking education to children. One of the best things about it is that it promotes independent learning in children. The online education itself, it promotes a lot of independent learning, which is very good. And it breaks the spoon feeding form of education, which is very good. But then it is again a very small part of the whole country is going to be a part of the blended learning. And again, the children of our villages, the children who we work with, all those children are going to fall back, and I don't know when they are going to be a part of this tech revolution that we are seeing right now going on. So I don't see when it's going to happen. I don't see how blended learning is going to take place for our children. Maybe for teachers or maybe for schools in the cities. There is a big picture that can be painted. But for me, in my mind, I just cannot paint any picture. Even normal, regular school learning has not been possible right now, and we don't know how it's going to look like in post-COVID situation. So I might not be in a position to say anything about learning in villages or especially in rural areas. Yeah.
So what I felt was that there is always a concern about whether this online learning that we have implemented, so many people couldn't access it, so many students couldn't access it. So will that cause a fall in their learning outcome as they go by, because they are losing out? Some students get this, there is an unequal opportunity. Some people are getting this opportunity, some people are not getting it. So that causes a wide disparity in the learning outcomes. So how can we address that? I mean, in the post-COVID situation, I think that is going to be one of the biggest challenges if children are not getting the equal opportunities to learn. So I think I am opening this to more people, and Neeraj can, of course, comment on this, and before we go to other.
Sure, I would definitely let others to put in their thoughts. But just one thing that's coming in my mind right now is that it's definitely because of the huge divide that exists in the society. There are many children who would not be able to achieve their learning outcome. But I think this pandemic. I think this is the time where we move ahead or move beyond and maybe just broaden our mindset about what learning outcomes are, and if do we really have to rethink about learning outcomes, because now we are sure that community, there is a lot that children are learning in their homes. There's a lot that communities can teach us, and it's not that the school is one place where you learn about math or where you do science. I think we need to broaden that mindset, and maybe we need to relook into the learning outcomes. Maybe when we say that, okay, learning outcomes is not being achieved by this child and that child, maybe if we relook into our learning outcomes, then we might also rephrase the question. So yeah, definitely others can.
Is there any other take on this? How learning outcomes will be affected, and how that can be bridged? The unequal opportunity that happens in this new scenario.
I think government could help quite a bit, because now CSR has been mandated. I mean, they can use it for this situation. Probably on an urgent basis, providing e-learning resources would be, from corporates on a big scale, probably Wi-Fi routers and all that taken into villages. That is what I can think of. At least for the next 1 year, I don't see much of change. So, which means a lot of children will be lagging behind. Of course, like Neeraj said, we have to rethink our views on what are the outcomes. But at least the base, if it cannot be got through to the people who need it at this time, there's going to be a big divide. So some kind of push for government mandate for urgent CSR help with tablets, with phones, or whatever it is. At least not individually, maybe for the village, for the community, for the panchayat or something like that, is my thought about it.
So Thomas is a very renowned corporate trainer based in Kerala. So he's a regular member of the Rajagiri Roundtable. So we are thankful to you for those comments. So I think 2-3 issues were discussed here. One is that we need edu startups to provide some kind of support to the ensure that blended learning actually happens. So that is something we can always take up with the edu startups. And regarding infrastructure, as Thomas George said, we need some kind of involvement of the government as well as the corporate bodies through CSR funding or other initiatives. But more importantly, how the NGOs are able to overcome their own crisis. I mean, is there a funding crisis for NGOs? And whether they are able to generate that kind of donations they earlier used to generate. What are the specific problems that NGOs face and which they would like to address to the corporates as well as the policy makers? Is there anybody who could take up this topic?
Can I make a small comment, please? Okay. Good evening. Now, we have been focusing on this as to how NGOs are going to support the current learning process. The fact of the matter is that, yes, with the new situation, a lot of resources is required, and that's a fact. And unfortunately, the government is strapped on resources. That's also a fact. And the third thing now is that there is also, if you see from various communication which we read in the media, there's a lot more controls on the NGOs by the government. I think that's something which is going on now in different areas. So with these things coming in together, definitely I think the NGOs' ability to come down and support all these things is definitely limited. So I think it has to be definitely the government support should be there, and to also government to evaluate a little more as to which are the NGOs which has to be controlled and which are the government should be a little more opened up, because we need support from all sides. Otherwise, you will have a situation by which a large part of our students will be left behind for lack of resources. So we need to find resources from every area, and NGO is one of the resources from which we can have. And unless there is some amount of freedom for the NGOs to operate, there can be a problem about getting the resources which we need. I mean, this is my small contribution I would like to say, because I hear a lot of news about controls on NGOs now.
Anybody from the NGOs would like to have a view on this, whether there are more controls coming on the functioning of NGOs, and how you are going to meet the challenge of getting more funding and carrying out your activities?
Well, definitely, I mean, with changes in the FCRA, or even with regard to some CSR funds that are now committed to other larger, organizations. So securing funding at this point is very difficult. For NGOs, I think if we get on, partnerships really are what can help us sustain the work that we do and build on it, really, whether it's government partnerships, whether it is partnerships with universities or other technical institutes. But at the same time, I mean, while at Ektara, what we have, realized is that we do get in people who are interested in supporting us with maybe some, infrastructural needs in terms of giving us some devices and things like that. But nobody is really willing to invest in the running cost of these things. Now, today, even if we are to set up for any online program that we might want to roll out to our children, the 1,000 kids that we reach out to, there is a regular running cost behind it, whether it is internet charges or whether it is paying the teachers. But there are very few takers for it. So again, as far as resources are concerned, as far as curriculums, things like that are concerned, modules are concerned, there is a lot available. And with right guidance, I'm sure most NGOs can, get into that. But we definitely need more support in terms of how we can run. Setting it up is one thing, but running it is somewhere we feel that we don't often get adequate support. So I'm not sure if this is an experience that resonates with the other NGOs which are here, but that is something we've faced.
Going ahead, it's going to be a tough job for the NGOs to pool resources I think we'll have one or two more views. So what I find is that there are issues which is unique to the present situation, because we were never in such a situation in the known history as far as NGOs are concerned. So how best we can, already we have a challenge of so many children not able to reach school or dropping out of school. And NGOs have been actually been catering to that kind of community, either through vocational education or some other what do you call methods of teaching. So going ahead, do you think that will be one of the areas where NGOs can focus on? Giving already vocationalization is also an important agenda in the new education policy 2020. We are going to have more of vocational learning in the regular school also. So there can the NGOs do a very significant job.
I think the way I think NGOs had always been a very crucial part of the society, and what NGO does is very different from these aggressive startups or corporates, which is that they go in much greater depth. If you take all the good work in pedagogy, in the curriculum, most of it has been done by a lot of people from NGOs in India. And we NGOs cannot be confined to saying that, okay, this is a small part of vocational training that you can take care of. Okay, this is a small part of math learning you can take care of. It cannot be confined into that. NGOs work with people, and they keep on working regardless of these drastic changes that's happening in the country right now. Even if everything's moving to EdTech, and there is a lot of pressure on NGOs, but they will eventually learn all of that, and I think they will be the first one to actually adapt and do some good work into that, which will be very effective actually. And I think that's how I see the work of NGOs, because I think they give a much greater depth to what's being done aggressively in the market, and I think they are going to play a crucial role in taking these bits to children too.
Neeraj, I found that you're working in Chhattisgarh. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So have you already developed some kind of pedagogy which will be suitable for children? You are mentioning that NGOs are also making pedagogies and curriculums.
Yes.
Have you done some experiments in that, or can you elaborate on that? Or you just said
sure. So I was saying that because historically, I was saying that because in this when Eklavya started, they did amazing work in the curriculum, and then it got adopted by NCERT, and a lot of people who worked in Eklavya are the curriculum makers of the NCERT. But speaking of my organization, so we have been working here for quite a few years now. And one of the major things that we work is how can children connect more with schools? How can children connect more with curriculum? So what we try to do is we contextualize a lot of things that's already there in the curriculum for children. For example, a child who doesn't relate with the festivals, the regular routine festivals of India. So if you can bring in Child's Festival, if you can bring in the child's work and then integrate it with the curriculum, then the child can relate more with it. So those kinds of a lot of experiments we have done with children. For example, our children, they know a lot about trees, they know about insects. So we start with that. If there is a chapter about ants in the EVS subject in grade 4, so a child living in Sukma knows a lot about, can name 10 ants, and then we start teaching from that. So that sort of experiments I can say. I mean, I can definitely elaborate depending on the time.
Okay, I asked that question because, this may be an occasion for us to develop a kind of new pedagogy and curriculum which will be suitable for the times, for the blended learning, which governments, I don't know whether all governments are doing. In Kerala, I think government is doing quite a bit in this regard. But in other states, we don't know what is happening. But from your report, it looks like that it is not happening in a similar way everywhere in India. So is it a meaningful thing that we NGOs can stand together and develop something, a new type of curriculum, which is mentioned as blended learning or some other name we can call it, but the pattern, the design of it will be suitable for this kind of situations? That was my question. This is a question for all the NGOs. Is it meaningful to have something like that to cross over the crisis, education crisis? Because the school-based curriculum is not going to work for quite some time. I mean, I don't know. We don't know when the schools will be open again.
I think, yeah, whatever we do as an NGO or the government, all of us need to be in sync with each other. We cannot have NGOs doing something different and the government, either not doing or doing something different. We need to be on the same page. Because for us, after a certain point of time, the children are mainstream and they go to formal schools, which means that they do fall under specific curriculum, whether it's CBSE or ICSE, so whatever. So the NGO's blended learning curriculum needs to be in sync, So we have to put a thought to that, not doing something very separately.
Yeah, we have a national curriculum framework given by NCERT. And
yes.
Basing on that, could be
that has to be acceptable by the government and given that recognition that what the NGOs are doing are recognized. Otherwise, at the end of the day, we'll be doing something and it will be very difficult for the children when they go in for further education, that it's not recognized what you are doing is something different for what, So we do need experts coming into and guiding NGOs on how to frame proper curriculum for the future of our children. It's just not about teaching methodology. It's also about the children, how they take the learning forward to higher studies, So somewhere everything has to be in sync with what the NGOs are doing and not doing something separate.
I think I'll just quickly add to it. I'm sorry, I've switched off my video. There's some internet issues. To add to what Mitali was just saying, most NGOs already do what the NEP talks about in terms of, offering a more holistic education and, bringing in other components, introducing skilling, things like that. So while this is, NGOs react to it and have been doing it in a certain manner all these years. I think now what we really need is if there is a overarching guideline almost that everyone can follow, then the work is concerted and there is not, it's not happening in different fragments. So there is definitely a need for organizations to come together, brainstorm on what different solutions can be, what works, what doesn't work. And then maybe, the government can decide, okay, so these are certain things that have worked out and maybe we can try it out in certain specific areas. What might work in rural areas, it might not work in urban settings and vice versa. So it's very important to have conversations like this, which bring out,
yes,
what is going right and wrong. And only then I think can we look at a more wholesome picture of what the way ahead looks like, because right now it's so it's uncharted territories for everyone really. So even for blended learning today, sitting here, we know we've been on the ground, so we know, like Neeraj also mentioned, we've never really looked at parents as educators before, and this situation pushed us to consider them as very valuable, members in this whole education system. So it's not, they are not passive people anymore. Their role is very, very active. So it's also very important to train parents to make them more conscious of their role in it. And even if they are not been formally educated, how do you kind of, bring in their experiences into the learnings of the children and take that ahead? So these are all different elements that need to come together in a blended learning model. It's not just about, traditional classroom teaching or what online needs are, or what future ready kids need to know in terms of, STEM learning and coding and things like that, but also understanding basics of what their parents, know or have knowledge of. How do you utilize that? How do you incorporate that into the learnings of the child? These are all very, very important, we feel.
Great. So you have raised one point, that is the involvement of the parents, which was lacking so far. So I think we can have a framework where we can add all these together and make a kind of a recommendation, because we are now in uncharted territory. So why don't we have more suggestions like this, where we can include, synergize those together and develop into a sort of recommendation. Are there any other areas that we need to look at, where we need to frame something into a concrete policy which we can recommend?
What Manjusmita said is very correct, that uniformity of this blended learning is very important. I never thought about it, because down the line, 1 year later, the board is going to ask, the government is, what did you do or what are you doing? And you have 1,000 different formats. It's going to create trouble. So very good, like Srikumar said, this kind of discussion. So these things come out, and that is very urgently needed, I think, before we go further down the line. Okay.
Janani is there. She has been our participant before also. Would you like to comment on this? Yeah.
Yeah. I think my connection, is my audio okay? Because
yes.
We have surprisingly a lot of rain here in Chennai. So
yeah.
Basically, I'm associated with a private school. So from the NGO point of view, I really wouldn't have much to add. I've been listening with interest. There is just one point, however, that I would like to make. We can use these challenging times to give our education the much needed, overhaul. It's long overdue. Some of you will remember when Doordarshan began in the 80s and the 90s, TV news used to be pretty much like, radio news. There was just a newsreader reading out the news. So the only thing we got in addition to what we already got on the radio news was we used to be able to see the newsreader's face. That was all. But now if you compare it, we get these, visuals and graphics and a picture-in-picture and the stickers scrolling all over the screen and, flash news, reports from the place of action. So there is so much more possible, which at that time we didn't know. So I feel we are using this internet and communication technology, ICT, just like television was first using, unaware of its own capacities. So instead of the teacher teaching in class, we now have the same teacher lecturing online. So I feel there is so much more potential in online that, we can use further, and it is in its nascent stage. So I feel if we find more about it. And another thing is, all along, for our education was not inclusive even before this online started, now where the differences are actually in very stark detail. For the visually challenged, for the physically challenged, we were not actually doing much. And now with this possible, I think especially for these disadvantaged, for the visually challenged, there is so much more of audio and multimedia that is being created now, which we can use to make our education more inclusive, even after things go back to normal and we are out of the COVID situation.
Oh, so great. Actually, NGOs have a large role to play in inclusive learning. So you are very hopeful that this will have a positive outcome, this online experiments that we are conducting. Is it that you want to convey? Okay. So I was also reading through another news report there, which is published in Kerala. It is that children were actually going for tuitions apart from the online learning. So is it that the online pedagogy that has been developed that has not been suitable for this online learning, and children just don't find it palatable enough to, I mean, they are trying to have a regular classroom through an online system. Is it a problem that that is being faced across the country? Would anybody?
If I can say something on that.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of children in my own family go to a lot of private school, and they have been doing learning on Zoom for quite a few months now. And I keep talking to them how you feel it, and they are like regularly saying, oh, I don't like it, and things like that. But that's okay. So what I want to say here is, like, when we say online learning, it is again, I think, I don't know what happens to human beings. Again and again, things just narrows down. Most of the teachers I know here and people I know here would say, like, okay, online learning is like learning on Zoom, or online learning is like watching a video or downloading an education app and seeing videos on that. But one of the major components that is missing here is that online learning enables us to enter a new world. For example, if you see a Brilliant, which is an amazing app, you can visualize amazingly a lot of math stuff, a lot of abstract things in math and science that goes on. So that is a beautiful example of using online stuff. GeoGebra, again, is a beautiful way of graphing things. And there are many, many things. I think Janvi said about a lot of things being done for visually impaired children. One of the beautiful things that I have seen online is how visually impaired children can create music and a lot of and drawings using moving their heads and fingers, and they can listen to that. A lot of things are available now online which are underutilized, just because a lot of people think that online education is just a medium, but it is not just a medium. There is a lot we can do in it. We can utilize its ability to do what we cannot do on boards, what we cannot do in physicality. We cannot go inside an atom. I think that is a component we need to look more, rather than seeing it as a medium to communicate information to children.
So sorry, again, I'm just coming in to add to what Neeraj said. I think it's important that, you know, there is so much wonderful material available out there. But as educators, as teachers, if the information, if they don't know about it, or if they don't know how to go about it, and, you know, and often these are very easy, you know, self-exploratory exercises as well. I mean, the student can do it on their own if they know that, you know, such a thing is available. But teachers need to be also trained. So what I'm trying to say is, there really needs to be a lot of work that goes into upgrading teachers, I mean, and educators. While some of us are, you know, we've been lucky enough to work with technology, or we are comfortable in working with, you know, phones and internet and things like that. Bulk of our educators still aren't. So how do you, and unless they, you know, whether it's the parent who's filling in as the role of the educator or the teacher or whoever it is, it's very important that they are made aware of what is available and how you use it to the best of, you know, to the best possible potential. So we also need to think about ways of popularizing these and building capacities again.
So in between, I would like to have a small intervention and to discuss something which Pallikudam has implemented, because we have implemented an online school, Pallikudam online school, where it is more of an activity-based learning to supplement the regular classes. So here we have 4 different levels, that is from preschool, which is called Playmate, then primary, which is companion, and then there is friend for the high school, and mentor for the pre-university level. So this is based on a unique pedagogy that we have developed. It's called Pallikudam pedagogy. And I think our director, Dr. Gis Pandalukaran, will be highlighting some important points about that. And it is the uniqueness is that it is also built on the NCERT curriculum framework. So a lot of activities which develop some new skills, which is very much required rather than the kind of knowledge or information that is amassed throughout the learning cycle of any student. All these add to what you call a composite set of skills as they progress in their learning. There was one issue which we talked about, whether NGOs should be just implementers or whether they should also actively take part in a formation of a curriculum. So I think that is something which we need to now discuss, whether apart from being an implementer, should they be also be actively involved in the framing of a curriculum, because they are very closely associated with the stakeholders whom they are serving. We find the Geo Youth, Anush Lahoti has joined us, and Savita. Would any of the new participants, would you like to comment on this?
One more point that before anybody starts off, I just want to say is a lot of activities are possible. For example, I just read Google Meet has now 100 breakout rooms to do activities separately and then come back on again. So all these have to be a lot of, I mean, like Manju said, teachers have to be updated with these features. Neeraj also said there's a lot of possibilities. So all these could be utilized to be part of this, of the learning process, even post-COVID, it's just going to be there. So utilizing these breakout rooms for maybe discussions with parents, with among themselves, and come back, and all that should be utilized. But a lot of people are not aware of this, so, including myself to a certain extent. But all these can be utilized. Yes.
So I think the most important point that we have to now discuss is whether NGOs can be part of a process whereby they also add to the curriculum framework, which can be accepted across the country. Will that be a possible solution to some of the problems that we are facing now?
Definitely. Definitely they have to be involved, because they are more eager, I think, to get across these challenges than the authorities sitting in Delhi or the capitals and pushing paper this way or that way. Definitely they have to be involved, but obviously there'll be some kind of certification, some kind of whatever you should bureaucracy will come in. But all these people here and the hundreds across the country have to be involved in forming this curriculum.
Yes, I am from an NGO sector. We are Mitras. We have an NGO. We skill the rural youth around, and I am from Puttaparthi, like Andhra Pradesh. And like you were asking, you were saying, do the NGO need to be in the curriculum making? I think we should be, because, like for example, we skill the rural youth around Puttaparthi, which is in Andhra Pradesh, Anantapur district. So when we train, or like we follow the curriculum for Tata Strive. So we partnered with Tata Strive and we are knowledge partners with them. So there are quite a time when we actually tweak our curriculum according to the understanding of the needs of the rural youth around. So it would be really good if we could also be a part, because we understand, like how you were saying very nicely, we actually have the hands-on with them than people who are sitting in Delhi and making the curriculum. But of course, now I think you are all speaking in the school or education level, right? CBSE or maybe state board, that curriculum level. What we do is we train the graduates or the pass outs or the 10th standard who have failed and all of them. We train them and give them job opportunities in the area, like we are doing BFSI, GDA, Tally, and sectors like that. So I think it would be a very good initiative if even the NGO sector gets involved into curriculum making. Thank you.
So what in your view is the problem? Why are these children not able to continue their studies and then get connected with you for this kind of skill development? What in your view is the...
I think the students, actually one of the main reasons we started Mitra's skill development is I was in a school. Like I was in a CBSE syllabus school for the rural students. So we realized that these rural children, it's very difficult for them to pick up, all these 5 subjects, and especially with CBSE standard. The standard of education, they don't have the support from home. At home, when we go back home, our parents, somebody is there to help us with all our studies. And education is very high. And sorry to say, education, I don't know if there are educators and from the CBSE and all out here, but the standard of education is very high and rote learning. I'm very sorry. It's very less of skilling. You actually pass because you're able to mug and understand you more than you actually understand, right? So when we realize that some of these dropouts or some of them who don't really perform well, failures, all of them, you give them one subject, train them well, skill them up in one, improve their communication skills. I think they do well. End of the day, everybody wants a job. That's one of the reasons why we started this.
So that is again another new issue which has now come up, because whether we should have a national curriculum which doesn't meet the specific needs of a rural community, and whether this high standards which we try to impose, and whether that is suitable for this kind of a rural environment where we have more number of students to be addressed. I think that's a very valid point, and maybe that should be discussed further, whether there should be a more kind of customized learning for the rural areas.
Yeah, because they are all first level learners. We really don't. I mean, when you go to their homes, you see them. So we do all this. We go to the homes and we actually understand what they go through. You go to their homes, we understand that you come to the school. You're all smart, well dressed, and you're looking very nice and with all school bags and all your box and all. But the moment you go home, you see the parents, where they come from. Laborers, or all these grade 4 workers, drunk fathers, beaten up mothers, and the house just one single room. Everything happens in that room. How do these children handle the stress of your homework and after school effects and all these things? Where do they get the chance? How do they handle these things? These are the stress. They come to the school and we tell them this is right and this is wrong. They go back home and they see something else. So it's a very big turmoil that these children actually go through. Maybe curriculum need not be different. Maybe because, end of the day, the job market doesn't ask you whether you're a rural or you're urban. The job market only asks you, have you done well? This is your percentage, you get job, right? But maybe we could understand, and education could be more practical, skilled, along with memory and rote learning. That is something which has to happen in our country, which I don't know will ever happen or not.
Actually, the new education policy also talks about the same issue of skilling in different areas, developing problem solving and other kind of skills rather than just rote learning. So your point is well taken. And I think our system needs to have some more overhauling before it can actually happen.
But it will take, I think, another decade or two for all this to really set up in our system. Maybe. I don't know.
But ma'am, you are from Andhra Pradesh or?
Yes, Andhra Pradesh.
Andhra Pradesh, Puttaparthi, Anantapur district, Andhra Pradesh, Rayalaseema.
Your government seems to be very progressive government, no? So are they not looking into these aspects of rural learning? In this
actually, government, I'm sorry to say, I don't know if I can be really open about, but I would love to, because our government has made all the youth into volunteers, giving them some 8,000, 6,000, 8,000 rupees job. and they will be supplying ration. Okay, I think for COVID it was good to have this system because they could go home to home and they could help people with finding out awareness and all that. But like most of the youth in Andhra now are able to just stay home, give some groceries to all your 50 houses that you're appointed, and you earn around 8,000 rupees. Why will I work hard? Where will I work hard? Why will I skill myself more? This is enough for me, is what we are all into. So the youth actually you should skill them up in such a way that tomorrow they are able to handle any situation, every situation that they go through, right? But unfortunately, I think we are giving them many freebies. So otherwise, yes, we are having a lot of these skilling things. But I think it should be from the center level, sir. Until the center does it.
So going ahead, how do NGOs visualize their role? Do you find any, are you going to realign yourself, because the challenges are different from what you were used to? We still had a lot of people still not reaching school, or those who reach school, they are dropping out. But we had so many programs like Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and National Literacy Mission, which was launched by Rajiv Gandhi. But the fact is that so many children are not able to reach school. Those who reach school drop out after maybe 8th standard or so. So this challenge of bringing, retaining them in the school system, educating them and making them part of this progressive economy, how best NGOs can help in this? Rather than giving the entire responsibility to the government or the private sector, what effective role here the NGOs can do, depending on this new challenges that we are going to face?
Is this like, can I answer the question or somebody else?
Yeah, you can.
Okay. So I mean, if you would ask as an NGO, one is I think the government should also believe that our NGOs are also working with all these government changes that you're getting into, and all your FCRA has to go only to your Delhi SBI and all the curbs that we are having. I do understand there are lots of mushrooms. I mean, NGOs are like in millions in India, and maybe many of them may not be doing what is required or anything. But if we could go hand in hand with the government, because the population is so high, and the government is ready to hold hands with, or the NGO also is equally allowed to hold hands, and at par we are able to do a lot of effect. I think we should be, especially these government schools. Now, if you just take the government schools, I don't know, at least around us, and I'm sure it must be around your home, everywhere, wherever all of us are, most of our government schools don't work well. I don't think the teachers, for the earning that they have in the private schools, they earn a lot in government schools, but are they training or teaching the same capable enough? Are they capable? First of all, the question is, are our teachers capable? I think when I just logged in, I heard one girl saying this. I'm sorry, I couldn't really get all your names, but she was saying something about whether the teachers are trained. Actually, our government teachers are not trained enough. If you are not trained, how will you impart knowledge to the others? Where will you impart knowledge to them? So I think government schools could be improved. Abroad, actually private schools are less, government are more, right? So if the government schools improved, automatically all these rural segment and everything will improve. So we should be able or allowed equal opportunity or we could work parallelly with the government. But again, I think it's I don't know when it'll happen.
Yeah, I agree with you, Savita. I think we need to work in sync, the government and the NGOs, and not work separately. And that kind of recognition we need from the government.
that trust is very important. Yes, we were a part of another conversation yesterday, and there were some very successful NGOs who had, done like large scale NGOs who had participated in a lot of PPP models with the government, which is why they could scale, and now they're being able to do, and now the government takes them seriously. But I think if there was a platform where even smaller entities which work in very specific areas, whether it is, us or any other place which is working with a specific target group, if they are also given a chance to kind of come in and share their experiences, share their expertise on the ground, I think it can really help a great deal. And the whole idea is make the government schools have the best, they're located in the best places, especially in urban areas. I mean, they have the best resources. So it's almost, it doesn't make sense to reinvent everything and, for NGOs to do everything on their own. We can never match up to what the government already has to its disposal. And where the government struggles, we can definitely come in and help. So I think we all across the country, we need to look at more willingness from, whether it's at the bureaucratic level or, I don't know, the political level. There has to be more faith in what's going on in NGOs and take the work ahead.
And who's going to bell the cat is what is the question, because we don't know. It's a big struggle. You ask us, we are a very small NGO. You ask us, it's such a struggle to get in and, connect to the government.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you. Yes.
And the amount of administrative and paperwork and all that pussy that you have to keep doing, you end up working what you want to do. So we actually land up going in for CSRs and other non-government organizations because you do work that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to take this point forward. Hi, I'm Shivi Patak. I'm from Society. So the point, I do agree that we should go hand in hand with the government, but the hierarchy system is so much in the administration that we are unable to make it to the result and increase the productivity. So on ground level, talking about the dropout rate, NGOs can actually get into with the community. If the community participation will increase, if the parental participation can increase, then the dropout rate we can help in decreasing this rate. So if this community participation increases, here the NGO can actually take the step forward.
Yeah, this is all possible, but one very important question is, end of day, how she was saying is this, you get a lot of resources and funding and everything which the government has. You, as NGOs, you'll have to keep running around, proving yourself, asking. There is a lot that happens in that end. End of day, funding is the most important thing. You cannot work without पैसे के बिना क्या कर सकते हम लोग. Community help will be there. Parents are very, very supportive. All that is there. But then the support that a government gets and the support that a government can give or a big organization can give, that is something which will become easier for smaller NGOs to work. But yes, as NGOs, I think we have to understand that we have our commitment level. We have to perform well. We have a social impact which may not or cannot be really graded out. So social impact many times is not really seen externally. It's not like marks or percentage. But obviously, it is the impact or the outcome that is seen only after maybe 1 or 2 years. Now I employ my one of my students. 3 months I give training. I employ him or her. I handhold him for a year till he is stable, and if I can push him to the next level. But the impact that the student or the child has gone through is seen only after a year, right? So the time span an NGO take for an NGO is much smaller for a government organ or a bigger organ.
There's lots more societal resources like retired army personnel, retired doctors, teachers, all that could be harnessed. I don't know in what way. So that's there's a lot of people sitting around idle who have the knowledge, who have the experience, who should be partnering with the NGOs. That's what I feel.
So that important point is getting that connect, NGOs getting the right connect with the government, because there are a lot of funding requirements and also huge infrastructure requirements. So you want to work parallelly with the government schools. Is that the idea?
We may not be able to work parallelly with the government. That's what I heard earlier in this forum, because we have to work hand in hand with the government. But at the same time, we have a niche area. We have to find a unique service which we could alone provide, and that I imagine many participating in this forum are already set. They're working in rural area. They're working for dropouts. They're working for some specific purposes, and this purpose may define NGOs. I imagine there is. I want to draw your attention to some development which is happening in the education sector. We are hearing about Byju's apps, for example. It's a big company, a $1 billion company already. Now they are in some way replacing the schools, the need of schools. They are reaching the students directly. Not passing through the teachers, they are meeting the students directly, and they are giving the teaching materials and training also. And that's the reason why I asked the question: do the other informal sectors also need to invent something to really match our services to the times? This is a special time where so much of disruption in education sector has never happened in the known history. I imagine so many months children out of school. This has never happened. But that's why I was curiously asking you whether some new disruptions are possible. With Byju's apps, the problem is that you have to pay. And these people will not be able to pay. They need a lot of money. So maybe some kind of simple siphoning, not going to this kind of complicated structure and systems. Can we bypass all the systems, make it simple? Simplification, as Thomas George used to speak about. Can some kind of simplification happen here in this education sector, which will allow us to do the work the NGOs are doing as a unique service to the society? Is there a possibility of some kind of innovations in this sector which will help us to do what we do in a best way, but not needing a lot of resources, which is not given by the government, not given by the corporates, because all corporate money is being siphoned by the PM CARE. That's what we always hear when we approach them. There's no money in the hands of corporates also, because they are all siphoned by the PM CARE. That's what is the typical standard response we get these days. I imagine the NGOs all over India is getting similar response from the corporate sector when we ask for some CSR funds. So I think this need is the mother of invention. So if we are constrained with the resources, we are constrained with the technology, the blended mode, we are already reached. Can we reinvent? I think Sri Kumar from Rajgiri Media has already asked this question. How will we reinvent ourselves as an NGO to do our job in a best way, but not depending on a lot of resources, less resource, simplification, siphoning of these whole processes. Is it possible? If Byju's apps could just remove the teaching group, schools, need of schools. I mean, we don't know for sure what will be the impact of that in the future generation. The noble touch of teachers are missing there. Purely work on Byju's apps, but that at least they communicate the content, properly. So these are the questions. I mean, is there a possibility, or do you already see some some small beginning of some disruptions happening in the education, which is provided by NGOs. I'm just asking a question.
If I could answer this, not as a school, because we are doing skill for 18 hours. We are in a rural sector, like Puttaparthi, it's in Madhya Pradesh, Anantapur district. It's one of a little village town. We are doing online classes. So what we are doing at present is we have purchased WebEx Meet, which is around just like for a year, it's around 20 or 28,000 or something like that. Because WebEx also started previously used to use the free model and then WebEx also started 60 minutes. You have to so we purchased this. The other requirement that is needed from the rural youth who are going through this training is a smartphone with this WebEx Meet and data, which I'm sure more of many of them are having it, at least our students. So we are doing online classes. So we do this blended learning. We're doing online classes for them 3 to 4 hours every day. Our trainers his or her own home, and we are doing this, whatever Byju's is actually teaching, giving you videos. We have our content and everything. We display it. We teach them day in and day out. Now we've actually finished one batch of BFSI, one batch of GDA, Tally also we have completed. So I think as government schools and schools as NGOs, we can just support these teachers with these a laptop for the teacher so that she is able to explain all her content and give her all the content, him or her. The students have, most of their parents and many of them will be having a smartphone if they could have. I think we will, I think to quite an extent it doesn't get disrupted.
I think Sri Kumar from Rajki Media has already mentioned a school in Nagaland. Maybe it is good for Sri Kumar.
St. Christopher.
Yeah, St. Christopher in Nagaland. And they were doing, they have chosen the best school to cross over the crisis, COVID crisis, in the national level. So they got the Golden Award. I think Sri Kumar has already mentioned that. And they do not have any major facilities. Of course, the school is equipped, I imagine. Is it not, Sri Kumar?
Yes, yes.
School is equipped, but the students are not. But then they do a kind of, maybe Sri Kumar, you can explain once again how they do and how they manage to get this crossover crisis.
So this school is 10 hours drive from Kohima in a place called Chessor in Nagaland. And actually the school is built of bamboo and locally available wood and other resources. So infrastructure wise, it doesn't compare with any of the mainstream schools that you can either in rural or any urban areas. So they had only limited digital access, only phones and WhatsApp. So what they did was they gave around 12 different activities during this lockdown period, 12 different activities, which are either arts or drama oriented, language oriented, different skills. So they gave around 12 different activities to these children, around 500 children studying in that school. And it is headed by Father Loyola Anthony, who comes under the Kohima Diocese. And they have actually implemented this through 2-3 different methodologies. One is that they distribute the task to all these children, maybe through WhatsApp, and they perform this in front of their parents. So most of the parents are actually peasants. They are farmers or engaged in some kind of processing activity which is related to agriculture. So earlier they never had the opportunity to involve with the child's education because the child went to school. But now there was an opportunity for the parents also to see the children perform various activities and become part of it. Then they also made an effort. Teachers went to all the houses of these children and then tried to connect with them. And children were encouraged to come to the school, not on all days, on alternate days or some formula which they developed. So they came to the school and they found that certain tasks are written on the notice board. They took those notes and then they came back and did that at the school, the home. So a lot of skills were developed, and actually children were more excited to learn because they were performing in front of the parents, and all these were sometimes recorded, and that made the whole process very interesting. Actually, a big a challenge, because they didn't have the digital resources or the internet infrastructure to carry out the online activities as directed by the state government. But they could carry on the process, and several new skills, storytelling skills or artistic skills, language skills, mathematical skills, all these things were developed through activity-based learning. And actually it was a mix of all the pedagogies that we can think of, which they implemented during this lockdown period.
Yeah, this is evaluated as the best school by Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. I mean, they were leading the assessment, a nationwide assessment. This is a disruptive model. That's what I wanted to highlight is, they do not have technology, they do not have facilities, but still they manage. As mentioned in the forum, parents are playing a big role in this in this new way of learning. Not teachers, because it's home-based, because children are locked in the rooms, in the four walls, and the parents are taking role and they are enjoying it. I don't know how long the enjoyment will go, but provisionally the parents are enjoying to see the performance of the children. And Srikumar has also asked me to explain what is happening in our Rajagiri media itself. We are also developing a kind of set of activities which is more future-directed, future-oriented. All details I need not tell. You can watch the videos which we are already produced to describe this particular curriculum. And this curriculum will work in this pattern. That's why I wanted to connect to that. With minimum resources, we can just take down take note of the activities and do it at home with the parents, with siblings. But these are all leading to futuristic values and skills, attitudes, and this is in accordance with the NEP 2020, the suggestions of the National New Education Policy. Also, we have also taken into account. It is working in the framework of NCERT, National Framework. So it should not be, there should not be mismatch. When we do this, we are also learning what they are supposed to learn. So this is what we have tried, and we are doing it nationwide. So we imagine this could be a kind of disruption. I want to learn from you rather than telling what I have done or we have done, because I imagine, because we are so committed to the needs of our people, we would have obviously developed some method or other, whether by way of pedagogy or curriculum or some kind of implementation methods we have done. So that is the richness which all NGOs are having in common, this passion. And maybe there's a need of making a platform. That's what we strengthen our correlation to build up on this synergy, I imagine. I positively hope that this will also be a triggering moment, a starting point of this kind of synergy, which NGOs in education has necessarily to take, because we are doing a very important task. We are passionate and we are working with the government as far as possible, but we are also taking to the care of the real needs of the people. We know the people, the needs, as many of you have already mentioned, better than the government itself, because we are in touch with the people. But we need to strengthen ourselves, being maybe on a platform. I think our knowledge partner is doing some job like that. That's what I hear from Srikumar.
Yes, Prashant Abi, would you like to describe your activities, Society's activities in this area?
Sure, sir. So first of all, this is the first time I'm joining the conversation right now. So
Yes.
like just a brief about what we do. Yeah. So basically, uh, I have co-founded this along with my friends in college. So we are second years in Bangalore in RB College of Engineering. So we have founded this like a social venture which is aimed at becoming a one-stop platform where NGOs and organizations, student bodies, initiatives, volunteers, and donors, they can all interact and like be part of this collaborative forum. And we focus on two things, like because most of the time with the problems with with the NGOs that we have seen, because initially the way we had started out was that I was looking for some opportunity, maybe if I could volunteer at some specific organization, maybe impart some skill or something to their students, and I was looking for opportunities but I could not find them. So that's the reason I came across this idea that we could do something like this. So two main things that we do on Society. One is to connect volunteers to NGOs through skill-based volunteering opportunities. So we've got positions coming up like content writing and graphic designing, web development, social media marketing. So these are some skills that the organizations require. They, in fact, most of the times they do not even know that they need to they require those skills. So that's why we provide them with the volunteers, because it's not always that they could come across people who have that skill or who could maybe contribute towards their organization. So that's one thing that we do. And the second is that we connect different organizations to each other through like if they've got similar interests. So whatever organizations may be working towards say education, we connect them together to maybe go forward and conduct a collaborative event or an activity wherein teachers from one organization could help out students in the other. So in fact, that's what we had done with Mitra's Foundation and a student club in Mumbai. So this is where we also feel the importance of involving the students, because we ourselves are students. So involving student clubs, so clubs like Rotaract and NSS, Enactus, they've got their various projects running in different cities. In fact, student organizations who are not yet registered as NGOs, but they're still working towards helping out society. We connect these organizations with the NGOs. So it's not always like possible that the organizations like non-profits would get some help from the government. But what we could do at our end is to connect these grassroots level organizations with student bodies and other such organizations who could probably help them out with a similar thing.
Prashant, your idea is an amazing idea. In fact, I should comment on that, like that. It's also timely because as you have noticed, the NGOs are really having some problems, not only for the financial resource, but also for human resource. And I imagine you are doing a great service. Are you connected world, India-wide, or have you already made a breakthrough to the different states of India?
Yes, sir. So basically, it's been a month since we have started out with our initiative, and we've got about 50 plus organizations with us. They're from all over the country, and we have got 175 volunteering positions that are available at these different organizations. And to find the volunteers to be a part or to take up these positions, we are trying to partner with colleges. So there is this basic, I think, AICT points. It's the AICT regulatory body. They've got those points that are coming up for, you have to get those minimum number of points to get your degree at the end of 4 years. So every year used to have these, food drives and collection drives and village visits and all of that. But then this year, because of the pandemic, we thought that maybe we could capitalize and maybe we could, take some, we could like sense an opportunity here that the maybe the students are not getting, they wouldn't be able to go out and volunteer physically, but they could obviously take up these remote positions and they could help out organizations. So this is how we are doing it. And the presence, that's how we've like begun with our college for the volunteers. And that's how we are going on and on expanding.
So you're still in college. You're not.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we're still in college, and we are in fact even thinking of having a mentor board on Society. So to attract more volunteers, and to even, like I told you, that a few organizations don't even know what a content writer is, and they don't know that they require maybe a person adept in SEO for their website, because that's how they could help out, or that's how they could establish their presence on the net. So we are trying to get hold of like mentors who would be interested to just teach the non-profits, to help them out with their administration or any other tech related necessities or things, and how to maybe just some basic things like how to draft emails, how to ask for how to set up a crowdfunding. So we are trying to get mentors who could teach them, and at the same time the mentors who could even teach the volunteers who are coming onto Society. So maybe if there is somebody who wants to learn a particular skill, they could the mentor could maybe just teach them, and then they could apply the same skill at these organizations. So this is how we are trying to do our work at Society.
Yeah, I mean, imagine there are also opportunity for internships in such NGOs. I mean, this could be organized, is it not? It's promoted by the ACT, I imagine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So there's a good scope for your company. Best wishes and for your, yeah.
So if I can interrupt here, if as on the receiving end, Mitras, on behalf of Mitras and Savita here, I would say what I could not do for a year with especially graphics. And yes, we did have this, we have this with our students, something called Phone a Friend, that we connect these students with these elders or people who are around on phone, anybody available, a volunteer who could speak to them and improve their language, English. So, I mean, once a week, twice a week, thrice a week, whatever, they will get connected with, they'll be paired up with another person, and they would do the conversation and improve their language, because that is one thing which is really missing in rural India, that is your English, which is very important. We all know. So why I interrupted is Society and Prashant has helped me do 3 things in just a span of 1 month. I thank you so much, Prashant and Society, for always being, I mean, it was so easy. You just had to fill a form. And in few days, we got this help from this Omkar, who has finished a lot of graphic for us. And now this Road Track Club that is from Mumbai, these students, like Prashant was saying, he's connected the students with our students. So we had this, paired them up, around 20 of them. So nicely they have improved their communication and English and the patience. And in this process, I think the volunteers also learn a lot. And now I again have another person who's there with me, who's ready to help us with the graphics and videography. One more very nice thing is human, like how you were mentioning, human resource is something which is really a need, and volunteerism is something which is a need for NGOs.
Exactly.
So that I think Society is able to do, and such a young group and such young organization doing an amazing job. Thank you so much, Prashant.
Thank you so much. That means a lot, Andy. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
that's what we are. Sorry, yes, sir.
Yeah, continue. Please continue.
That's what we are, in fact, promoting, and like these collaborations between organizations, primarily between NGOs and the student clubs. So we have got similar events, about 7 to 8 more events that are coming up next month, and we are also keeping something like an online store for. There are about 2 organizations who have they approached us with this idea that they have not got their presence yet on the website, but they used to have these Diwali products every year. They used to have these conventions, and they used to go to fairs and put up their products, wherein the people used to come up and they used to see the products that are being made by the volunteers. So it was the volunteers at that organization. To just give you perspective, there is a foundation that makes products from trains the inmates at Tihar jail, and they make these products, and then then this organization ties up with a few companies to sell them, and then empower these individuals who are like serving their sentence in Tihar. So they were having these offline events every year, but then due to the pandemic, again, they were saying that if they could have something online. So next month, we are going to have something of an online store for these organizations. There are about 2 or 3 who have come up with their products, and they are, so basically whatever space we could help out organizations with, we are helping them out with that. And the 2 major things, like I told you, one is for the volunteering positions and the other is for collaborative events.
Prashant, I really congratulate you. I mean, this aspect of human resource is something which I think could be the core competence of your company. That's what I thought. Again, Thomas George was also mentioning about educated, retired people who could also very well reuse their talents and skills for developing the society and also training the new generation. So that's also amazing how people are retiring at a quite early stage, and there are a lot of energy still remaining with them, a lot of knowledge, a lot of learning, a lot of experience, and that should be transferred to the new generation. So something which connects the NGOs and network and synergize. And I imagine Sri Kumar, from part of the Pallikudam, I think it could be the tongue of this kind of NGOs and facilitating this kind of networking and synergizing. And because this is very important service, which we as from the media and Prashant from as a integrator of different NGOs. And Thomas George, I don't know what is in your mind. Do you have some idea to connect with the retired people to this structure of as a human resource for NGOs to employ them to rural education or guiding the next generation Indians?
Ex-army people will be a good resource. And also, Prashant, I don't know if you're in touch with IIHS, Indian Institute of Human Settlements in Bangalore. It's a new, I think about 5 years or something, they've started an urban fellowship program there. They have about 34 people have been selected as fellows, and from about 17 different fields. And they're doing a lot of collaboration. They need a lot of, they have a lot of expertise. They would need, to get in touch with people like you. Why I say this is because my daughter has just joined them as an urban fellow. It's a 10-month program, and it's amazing work what they're doing, connecting up like you're doing. So that's why I just send the link there. Contact them. It's the patrons are Nandan Nilekani and Deepak Parekh of HDFC, and it's an amazing organization. They connected with UN, Habitat boards, and all that. So this is definitely something you should look into. They have a lot of resources at their disposal.
Sure, sir. So, in fact, coming to your point, sir, like you were saying about getting in touch with the ex-army personnel. So we, I think a few days back, a week back, we were approached by this a foundation called Sambhav Kadam. So they are, it's being run by ex-army people itself, and they have created this whole community of people who have served in the army, the Air Force, and the Navy, and they were looking forward. In fact, so that's what we were also planning, that maybe if you could get hold of similar communities or organizations, that would be great, because one is the target we could have the target audience as students who could volunteer at these organizations, and at the same time, like the people who have retired, and maybe like what you had said even about the ex-army personnel.
Yeah, another thought which I had is whether we can have school students also as volunteers, because that will also be a great learning exercise. Being part of an NGO and working together and using their skills.
For school students, maybe like what I was thinking, that we could have a training session for them first, so that they could get the knowledge of using some skills. Even in fact, if we could even train the students of other organizations, of the ones who are like studying in these, the underprivileged or the people coming from a rural background, the students, if we could even just train them and they could go on and work at these specific positions in other organizations. So that too could be an opportunity, or that could be a possibility in which we could get more volunteers.
So the NGOs are having a lot of passion, and what they lack is money right now, and also human resource. And human resource part, I think, will be served by people like you, and other kind of visionary support can be done by the medias. So this is amazing. I think this is this roundtable has produced some good result. That's my feeling. I hope it will be also in the YouTube. How it is going to spread?
Yeah, it's been YouTube.
Yeah, so it will be there, and so people will be not only the people in this forum right now. Many others will be also watching, and they will be also benefiting and getting connected, I imagine.
And Nonshant, are you working in Kolkata?
Yes, ma'am. We have got 3 organizations in Kolkata. And
yeah.
I think if you've heard of the Leo Club of Royals. And there are 2-3 student bodies also from Kolkata. So yes, we are working there.
You do? Okay. Okay.
So Janani, would you like to comment on these issues? Because we have now discussed 2 major issues related to NGOs, how they can be part of the, more effectively become part of the education scenario in the country through various ways. So volunteerism is something which they are looking at to have the address the human resource. Then they look for funding through different agencies. That is another area. And they also need to work closely with the educational community, not just implement something. So what is your view on that?
One is, I feel there is a lot of willingness, a lot of people, like we heard some very good ideas about people from the army, people who are already retired, people who are willing to serve, who are all there. I feel this connecting, this networking. There are solutions for many of the problems we are trying to solve. Somebody has already solved it somewhere. What I feel is the need to network, to focus on these, success stories. And so for that, this one is networking. The second is dissemination of information. We see that the younger people are now more active. Even for climate, you see 15 and 16-year-olds know more, and they are more active and passionate about this cause. So we can use social media, you use it for all kinds of things, but we can actually, I feel, use it for networking, for disseminating information, so that we can, connect people like this. In this meeting itself, we've got so many ideas, so many people. So like this, networking it for dissemination of information, if we could also use the ICT that's available to us, the social media that is there for this cause, I think we will all benefit from that.
So before we wind up, are there any more comments or suggestions, anything which we have left out before we summarize? And also we'll be having a summary of the recommendations presented by different people, and this will be circulated to everyone. But is there any other quick points to be made by anybody?
Just one, I don't know how this fits it into this discussion, but I was reading about this science graduate somewhere in the north of India who was, he was sick of all these low marks in science and things like that from a lot of the community. What he did is he equipped a minivan as a laboratory, and he started driving into villages and teaching there for the day or half a day or whatever. And it was a big hit. And what the child didn't learn in a month in school, in half a day or 2-3 hours, they understood the whole process by actually going through experiments, seeing what it is. So that is also a possibility. Of course, it involves a lot of funds, but somewhere that can also there's so many cars and vans and buses seized by the police and lying rotting. These kind of things could be utilized somewhere.
Maybe Thomas, I ask a reverse question. Do you find a possibility of simplification for this entire process? You're an expert in simplification. I mean, of course, the synergy, the networking is a solution, as rightly discovered in this forum. We have sufficient resources scattered all over India. Now, just by networking and synergizing the resources, we'll be solving our problem for sure. But of course, there's a need of training regarding the new generation, next generation requirements, skill requirements, value requirements, attitude requirements. People should know that to be first before they can be teachers. So this is the challenge. Of course, a lot of challenges are there, but networking could be a backbone of the solution. Now, do you add to, from your knowledge of simplification, some process simplification that could happen in this in our proposed solution?
No, I think the best point is what is Prashant started, Society. That has really simplified the NGOs' access to a lot of information, to like content writing, things like that. So that is one point. Other than that, of course, from my background dealing with corporates as a different thing, they unnecessarily make things more complicated for themselves. But these organizations are at the grassroots level. They are simple as such. It's only difficulty for them is dealing with a complex government or bureaucracy or whatever.
So
that's where Prashant's Society comes in very, very handy.
I
hope it goes global.
This is the time for simplification, because the entire process has to be as simple as possible so that it can reach out to the grassroots. Complex will never reach, and you have to imagine that it's a great tragedy that's happening. I think Srikumar has already mentioned that there's a growing great digital, not only digital learning divide that's going to happen in our country. 1 year of learning is missing for one, it's affecting one generation. The governments are so silently watching the matter of learning. That's something very, very critical. That's why I asked many state governments, are they doing enough to solve this problem? They don't. Many governments, I don't think they consider it as a problem. It is as a normal situation they consider. It is not. The learning is disrupted, and there's a need of urgent intervention by the government. Just like fighting COVID pandemic, this is also another big area where the government attention should come, because this is our future. And if our future is disrupted, and the future cannot be disrupted. India, only future for India is the future, the next generation. And then the demographic advantage, which we all speak about. And if this demographic advantage is being disrupted and badly affected. And I think this is very, very serious problem. I think political sensitivity has not reached sufficiently to this problematic. In Kerala, we have some relatively good things happening. That's our thinking. But at the same time, many suicides have happened. For example, people who did not have access to digital facilities, they have committed suicide. It clearly shows how drastically this could affect the generations. And many other states, I imagine things are not happening properly. So this is a very urgent thing. Political will of the government should really reflect here. Otherwise, one generation is going to be drastically affected in learning outcomes. And 1 year is a very long time for a life of a student. That's my take on this thing.
Before we conclude, I'll just summarize because NGOs, the strength of NGOs comes from the grassroots, the involvement in the grassroots. And of course, they are also in a growth journey and they face a lot of problems. But the fact that an organization like Society has come up, and that too by the college students, which is a venture of the college students, shows that there is hope. Like whatever problems that we see or foresee in the coming months, all these can be solved through various mechanisms. We have already identified certain areas to be focused on. So many new suggestions have come up in this session. I'm really grateful to Prashant for being a knowledge partner for this event, and so bringing so many very talented people who are working in the grassroots level for a very insightful and informative discussion. I'm sure that we'll be able to come up with a set of recommendations which we can share with the Ministry of Education and also all the state governments. And let's continue this discussion forward. And we are glad to have so many people discussing on this vital issue. So once again, thank you all the participants, and have a great evening.